We are going to move on to an all-killer, no-filler lineup now, and we're going to discuss unleashing the creator economy. So in this session, we're bringing together some incredible creative minds and platforms to discuss the possibilities that new platforms and creators have been opening up for independent creators, and to explore some of the opportunities and challenges that lie ahead. If you like music, if you like tech, if you like the creator economy, this is the place to be. So I am going to beckon onto the stage our rock star guest, starting with the General Manager Europe from Patreon. Please welcome Ronnie Krieger. Welcome to the stage, Ronnie. A bit more of applause, please, yes. We do have some rock stars on stage now. Wonderful, thank you. Come and join us, Ronnie. Wonderful. And next we're going to welcome the founder and CEO of Startup Sesame, Ben Constantini. Welcome, Ben. Awesome. Okay, you'll see Ben a lot on social media. Make sure you connect and check him out. And now we're going to welcome Anthony Pakrosnis, who is the developer of partnerships for Northern Europe at Twitch. Welcome to the stage, Anthony. Great to see you. And completing our rockstar lineup, we are delighted to have a very brilliant electronic music producer and performer who is absolutely smashing it on Patreon. I recommend you all check out her profile. Please welcome to the stage, Rachel Collier. Thank you. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay, hello, aloha amigos. So just by way of background, I just want to say I'm thrilled to have you all here. It's a real honor, and music is very close to my heart. A million years ago, amigos, the first time I came to Barcelona in the 90s, I was in a band and we supported Depeche Mode in the Palau Sant Jordi. It was one of the best gigs I've ever been to in my life. We were nothing to write home about. They were amazing. But I've always loved music. I've always loved technology. And on stage, we have an absolute, like the creme de la creme of both ecosystems coming together and bringing forward the creator economy in this digital age. So I would love to start off in time-honored fashion by inviting each of you to give us the elevator pitch. Tell us a bit about who you are and what you do, and starting with your good self, Ronnie.
Okay. My name is Ronnie. I work in the music industry for about 30 years, have worked on all kinds of traditional music industry, recorded industry part, distribution, etc. Have worked with an online shop called Beatport, companies like Native Instruments and others. Hold a few board seats at some music associations, and I'm the general manager for Patreon in Europe. And that's about me. And who doesn't know Patreon? It's a membership platform that allows creators of all sorts to make a living and fund their creativity.
Fantastic. And Patreon, like if anybody likes podcasts, I love podcasts. All of my favorite podcasts, at the end, they say, go to patreon.com/ the name of the podcast to support us. And so, you know, you're doing so much to support so many different ecosystems. And speaking of ecosystems, we're going to go over to your good self, Ben. Tell the good people about Sesame and what you're doing over there.
Sure, thank you for having me today. Startup Sesame is a network of startup events, and we connect communities from all over Europe. In particular, we've been supporting entrepreneurs to get access to investments and corporate deals with events like this one. And in a previous life, I used to work in the music industry, like kind of everybody here in this group, and worked with MIDEM in particular, which is a big music conference. And I taught at Berklee College of Music some years ago. That's another life. Happy to be here today.
Fantastic. I think we all have many lives on the stage. And coming over to yourself, Anthony, now, I actually had my birthday during the lockdown on Twitch. It was great fun. I'm sure many people here are very familiar with Twitch through gaming. But talk to us a bit about Twitch and what Twitch represents right now.
Glad to hear that. I've had a good birthday on Twitch. That's great.
It was awesome.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Anthony. I work at Twitch.tv. I'm Director of Partnerships for Northern Europe, Turkey, and MENA. And that means my role is to look after our content creators that use the service in those regions, and also look to acquire new ones to the service that help us grow our reach and our relevance to local markets outside of North America.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you so much. And coming over to yourself, the grand finale, Rachel, talk to us a bit about what you're doing online. I think it's such an interesting journey, how you're kind of have established an entire ecosystem of fans on Patreon, and you're doing great work. So if you wouldn't mind introducing that to our audience, that'd be great.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Hey, everybody. I'm Rachel K. Collier. I'm an electronic producer and performer. Come from Wales in the UK. And like these guys as well, I started off on a mad traditional music route, but kind of fell into the online world. And now I've built up a YouTube channel, following on Patreon. So I've become completely independent, make a nice little salary from doing the things I love.
Living the dream. I absolutely love it. That's great. It's so inspiring. And I've been to your Patreon. You offer like great things for people who have different memberships, and you know, it really speaks to electronic music fans in particular. So I think you've found your tribe and you're building them there. That's brilliant. But I think it'd be helpful for this session just to start off with a few definitions and explore what the creator economy is. And I'm looking at your good self, Ben. So, you know, a lot of folks who are entrepreneurs maybe think that, you know, their work is creative. I mean, is that the same thing as a creator economy? How would you define it?
No, truth is, you know, I had a good friend who was telling me that a founder, like a startup founder, as many are in this room today, are creators. And kind of like, it struck my mind, like, okay, maybe per definition you could say anyone who is into a creative endeavor, like creating new things, like new products, services, new business, could be defined as a creator. But I would tend to disagree, and I was like, no, but creativity is a different area, and that's what I'd like to call under the brand, like under the name of creators, right? When we talk about creator economy, you're covering anything from music, gaming, TV, like, and including if you run a newsletter independently, you can be a creator. If you're doing it because you're running it like I do myself for marketing purposes, I'm not really sure I will fall under the creators economy. Right. That's kind of a starting point. I'm sure there's something else to say.
Absolutely. No, that's a very good starting point. Thank you. Very relevant to the whole startup ecosystem that we're in the midst of here at 4 years from now, 22. And, you know, Ronnie, you mentioned your music industry background there. You work for industry bodies at you know, Beatport and the mighty Native Instruments who make beautiful virtual and real instruments. You know, what's the industry viewpoint on the creator economy? How would you kind of define it in those terms?
Yeah, I mean, it obviously is on everybody's attention right now. The amounts of money that have been invested into the creative economy are just insane in the last 2 years. You know, I've gone through various stages of companies trying to get funding in the music and in the tech world, and it was always incredibly difficult. And I think last year, venture capital was just throwing large amounts of money at anything that had to do with the creator economy because they didn't want to miss out on the next big trend. And Patreon also participated from that. I think the last 2 funding rounds for Patreon were easier than anyone ever. And obviously I wasn't part about it then, but whenever Jack and our CTO are talking about these early rounds, you know, when Patreon started, there was no such thing as the creator economy, and their business was kind of like, what are you doing? What are you planning to do? Membership for who? And, you know, I think that has changed quite a bit.
Oh, for sure. I mean, one of my earliest exposure to the Patreon platform was a guy called Mark Horvath, who runs Invisible People. And he basically goes around and interviews folks who are homeless, and he gives them donations of things like socks and clothes, and it's very inspiring. And he's been on Patreon for as long as I can remember. So I think it's really like, you know, you've kind of defined this space as much as reflected it. You know, it's kind of the space has grown with your good selves. But coming over to yourself, Anthony, now, a lot of this is about empowering creators to reach their fans directly, and this whole idea of direct-to-consumer creation and monetization and that kind of thing. What's your view on the space, and how does Twitch fit into this direct-to-consumer economy?
Yeah, for sure. And I think Rachel put it really well, right? It's turning passions into livelihoods, right? And I think what Twitch does is or at least we aspire to create the conditions for individuals like Rachel to be able to do that, right? Yeah, you mentioned going direct to consumer. I think about it a bit like that. In a way, you're cutting out a lot of the traditional old gatekeepers and middlemen. Not to say there aren't new ones that might pop up. But yeah, it allows you, if you are a creative, an artist with an existing fan base, to reach that fan base directly and ultimately to monetize it, to turn it into a livelihood. It's also what's the driving force behind what's going on Twitch, right? Since we launched our subscriptions product in 2011, we've had 2.5 million people enter into either the partner or affiliate programs, which are the 2 monetization kind of tiers we offer on Twitch. The kind of key incentive there, I guess, if you will, is to join into the creator economy, take part in it, and ultimately support yourself and live off your art, right? So I guess that's how we think about it. We're a kind of creator-first business that tries to empower individuals to make the most out of that space to the extent they want to.
Yeah, fantastic, absolutely. And you know, coming over to yourself, Rachel, you are a living embodiment of everything that we've been talking about. You're actually using these platforms, particularly Patreon, to make it happen, to live the dream and to reach your fans, and they can support you in different ways. You know, what has this technology kind of meant to you, and how did you come to it, and like how has that kind of evolved in your own journey as a creative individual, as an artist?
I think it's just it's been really empowering. For a start, I've suddenly lost that middleman. I spent a long time sending my music out to record labels, things like that, and then even when you get a bit of interest, you have to wait for the reply on whether the snare and the lyrics are correct, and suddenly all of that's completely gone. You've now got all of the control. It's your creative vision. You can then bring that to life however you want. And what also I think is really awesome about this kind of direct to creator is, sometimes the more niche, the better, because if you're really into something which, is not ever going to be right for like a global market, actually there probably are some other people out there who are into the same thing, and you can then gather that audience, that community, build it. One of my closest friends in the industry, Mary Spender, she said from the start she knew no one was ever going to, sign her blues, pop, fusion, crossover thing, and she just went for it with YouTube, and now, she's pretty successful, Patreon following and YouTube following, and, we have a fun time. So I think it's just really empowering, and it's even now like I've just finished a track, and I'm just going to go straight to distribution and drop it in 2 weeks. I don't have to wait for anybody. I've got my whole community who I played it to at a listening party 2 weeks ago, and they're like, when can we pre-save it? So it's, I don't know, it just feels like you can move forward a lot faster than if you were still just getting caught up in between, all these middlemen and things like that. So,
absolutely. Yeah, so everyone down the front, 2 weeks' time, Rachel's Patreon, we're going to get the new track, right? But you mentioned your community there, and they're giving you feedback and that kind of thing. And, this is very different to the, the gatekeepers and the artists being a bit removed. It feels very much of the digital times. What role does that direct relationship and that community building have in your creative expression?
I mean, it's brilliant. Like, if I'm feeling, having a bit of an off day, not sure or whatever, I'll pop in the Discord or something, and immediately they come back like, RKC, you're a boss, like they've just got my back. And sometimes it feels like even if nobody else cares online, I know I've got my actual true community there who will support, anything really. So it's like a big musical family. There's no other real feeling that matches it actually. And I think in some ways, the online thing is actually like a huge part of it. If it was maybe face to face, it wouldn't. The fact that you can just all talk so quick, and even like the hearts, the digitalness of it actually benefits the whole feeling, and
Absolutely, yeah. We live in a world of digital natives. It's how we communicate primarily is online, and people crave authenticity, and you're giving them an authentic connection, an authentic relationship with you and with the music. But I think, Ben, coming over to yourself, you're a gentleman who has an incredible oversight of the whole startup ecosystem, what's happening in technology, in industries, and obviously we've just been through a pandemic. It's very nice to be here in person at 4 years from now. Face to face, yes, it's wonderful. But what did you see during the pandemic in terms of how that affected things like creator economy platforms and people's relationships with their digital selves? What's your take on that?
Oh, that's a very interesting question. During the first time of the pandemics, I think there was kind of a rush to the online space, right?
Yeah.
And people were very excited about the opportunities that suddenly, in particular creators, right, could engage with their audience. Let's say 24/7, like you were in lockdown. We were talking about this earlier. You're locked down. What do you do now? Okay, I'm gonna go and reach out to the artists that I love, etc.
Yeah.
But what was interesting, I think, over the last year, we already saw that transition, is that the craving for in person and that gathering again, as we're doing right now in person, like face to face, was a big element that we were all missing. So I'm really curious to see how this boost that we've seen in the past 2 years of all these even new online services, here we have Patreon, Twitch, who have been around for already several years, how it will kind of continue to grow or even survive this transition to a normal life in a sense. And a good example of this will be Clubhouse. That was like almost a fad in a sense.
Yeah.
It's still there, it's still active, they have users, but I guess that no one, maybe not no one, but very few people in this room have been logged in Clubhouse recently.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's sort of, Clubhouse exploded and everyone was on Clubhouse all of a sudden, but then, Twitter Spaces attracted some more traffic, and people seem to be using that a fair bit. It's a really good point. But I'd like to come over to yourself, Anthony. I mean, obviously Twitch has been, got off the charts during the lockdown with people doing multiplayer gaming and all this kind of stuff. Yeah. What have you seen as the activity, and where do you think it might go? Are we kind of approaching a hybrid age?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, Twitch traditionally, like what got us to where we are today has been gaming, right? We've always been synonymous with gaming, and the kind of communities of viewers and creators that have brought us this far have thrived in that space. I think what we're starting to see now is a real diversification of the type of content that we have on Twitch, right? Kind of accelerated by the pandemic. Which drove a lot of people to Twitch for the first time. People who might not have thought that Twitch was a product for them or a space that they could find an audience within. A couple of examples in the last year or so that we've got, like Fabrizio Romano, the sports journalist, right? Now breaks transfer deadline day in European football live on Twitch, right? Oh. So as that day progresses and players switch between clubs in Europe, you can follow that in real time, right? And he's got a community of fans that tune in, that have specific in-jokes and ways to relate to Fabrizio in real time as he kind of unpacks that day, which is of course so important if you're a fan of football, right? So that's one example. There are others. We've got like Christian Vieri in Italy, in Spain. We have Ibai Llanos, who's been huge recently, again in the sports space. Yeah. But music as well is another area where I think we've seen a lot of ground covered recently. It's an area we're kind of looking forward to doing more in. But I mean, particularly in music, I think we see great potential. Like the median, the average audience size for someone who can earn probably in the kind of $50,000 a year range for a music creator on Twitch is about 183, right? So it's difficult, very difficult to get an audience that is that size, but it's not so out of this world in terms of the size of the audience you would need to sustain yourself on Twitch. That, I feel like we're getting closer to a place where music can really live and thrive on the platform.
Absolutely. Yeah, interesting. A friend of mine in the UK, Kate Russell, she's one of the best kind of tech journalists, etc. She launched I think it's like a ferret farm or something like this. It's quite bizarre. She built a farm and she kind of goes on there with her ferrets and her boyfriend, and they kind of do these shows on Twitch. And she's got a massive following because she's from the world of gaming. She plays this online game called Elite, and she plays it on Twitch. She's been there for years. But it's just phenomenal. People are launching entirely new things on Twitch. And, I find it fascinating the way that yourself and the way that Patreon are actually operationalizing the building of communities. It's like all of you on the stage here are building communities in different ways. So like, what are some of the things that maybe you've learned from building a community, and what do you think is the role of technology there? So Anthony, if you want to jump in there.
Yeah, no, happy to. I think this is kind of what makes Twitch, right? There is a culture that exists within Twitch. If anyone has used Twitch in the room, you have emotes, which are kind of like custom emoji that you get as a benefit for subscribing to a particular channel, right? And what those emotes represent can vary by the channel that you're in, but often they are a reference point that is shared within the viewers of that channel, the community of viewers that come into that particular channel. And it means something to them, right? And this is just like one example of the tools that Twitch has built to facilitate like that community building process for creators that want to take part in it. What that's the same kind of product builds on is I think a desire for kind of identity in the digital space, right? You sub to a channel, that gives you a chat badge on Twitch that identifies you then across the site, if you so choose to use it, as a supporter of a particular creator's community, right? So there's the patronage element. You choose to buy in, but then you get to demonstrate the identity and the membership that you kind of gain through that process across the entire website. And people are proud of that, right? They want to show that they're supporting specific communities that they have an affinity with, right?
Absolutely.
Most of our products and tooling are built to achieve those ends, I would say.
Fantastic. Yeah, absolutely. I've noticed that a lot on Twitch. It is very much about identity and having that digital, that avatar, that self. And, it's very effective. And coming over to yourself, Ronnie, now, obviously, this is what Patreon has been doing for years as well, building communities. What kind of tools, techniques, approaches do you have to bring to the table within Patreon, and what are some of the learnings that you have from there in terms of building a massive online community of interest and keeping them together and supporting the creators?
So let me start by slightly disagreeing. Patreon is not building communities.
Okay.
We are building tools that allow creators to build communities.
Nice, yes.
Because there's no such thing as a Patreon community.
Sure.
There's Rachel's community, and there's like hundreds of thousands of other communities. And our job started by providing a payment solution. Because many people might know the story of Jack, who is a musician himself and was working on, like Rachel, was focusing on YouTube and was producing these incredibly detailed videos, spent 10K on a robot video, and then got his rev share for advertisement on Google of $166. And it was like, that's not how it should be, and that's how he started Patreon. And so initially it was the financial aspect of it. How can I find a recurring scheme that allows me to have an income that I can rely on over a longer period of time, where I can independently do what I really want to do? But then over time, obviously, the community aspect became an incredible add-on by experiencing how not only was this providing benefits to the creators, but also to the fans and supporters. And I think one of the big differences to the social media platforms is that most creators for years now had this idea of like, I'm chasing 100,000, 200,000, 5 million, 10 million, whatever the benchmark was, followers, so that I become famous. And that's what major labels still do, is like 99% of the musicians sign there in hope that they're the one next Coldplay, and the rest is gonna fall by the wayside. And I think the experience through membership is that you realize you're creating this safe space for yourself as a creator, and probably Rachel knows this much better, like to share things that you wouldn't really share in a public environment. It's safer. And for the audience, for the community as well, where when you look at social media, I love it, I live it, but just one negative comment, just a bot or a troll can destroy it for everyone, not just for the artist.
Yeah.
And having that like-minded community of people that are all there for the same reason, because they envy the creator, they want to have an exchange with like-minded people, and do so in a protected environment of whether it's like a closed Discord channel or whatever, is I think a really, really strong element that's mutually beneficial for the audience and for the creator. And that's definitely something that wasn't anticipated originally in the Patreon business model, but grew over time. And we often say that the financial aspect is what starts membership, but what maintains them over a longer period of time is a strong community.
Fantastic. Absolutely. Yeah, that's so inspiring. I'm beaming away here, hearing all these stories. This is just perfect. But so it's kind of, people go in for the, recurring revenue and the new bit, the kind of microtransactions and all that kind of thing. But it's actually launched a new way that, people who love artists and want to connect with artists can actually communicate. It seems to be kind of changing the way that artists express themselves. I mean, I'd like to bring in yourself, Rachel.
Yeah, sure. Like, totally agree with Ronnie, everything there. I do talk differently to my community because I know they financially support me. They've got my back. I feel like I can be way more honest, way more honest than I would be on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. I almost save all the juicy stuff for them because I know they care about me and I care about them. I want to give back to them. And the other thing is, there's this beautiful thing where you don't have to worry about any split, any engagement, nothing. It's all of that is removed. I can share with them the most honest parts of me and not have to worry about any of that. And they've even made a joke about that. I'll say, here's the long form edit of this video. You guys can have all of the, the swearing in between the camera going, keep it in, but they're like, oh yeah, you don't need to worry about the algorithm here. I'm like, no, so there's an element of freedom. You can really be yourself with the community as well. And when I started my Patreon, of course, I didn't predict that it would, again, it connects with Discord, and actually mine is a closed Discord via Patreon, so you have to sign up via Patreon to get the access, and then you can access. It's quite clever. It's quite sophisticated. And then if people leave Patreon, they also get booted out of the Discord automatically. And I actually started it because I was getting so many questions, and I was thinking, I'm getting asked all the same questions here in my Patreon messages. We really need to start the group. And then it just blossomed then, and from lockdown we started live events, and we've been keeping them going every month, where I listen to everybody's music as well, and it ends up being a really, really good night. I sometimes think, when I'm like, this is my job, and it's so nice getting to see people that support me, getting to hear their music, and sitting opposite the person, even though it's online, who's made it. It doesn't matter what genre, what level, what ability it is. It's still this this really cool connection.
Absolutely, yeah, Anthony.
It's really interesting what I think Rachel was saying. We talk at Twitch about this idea of multiplayer entertainment, which is kind of premised on the idea that audiences are kind of tired of the one-directional broadcast experience that you would get in kind of traditional linear media, and that they want to find ways to kind of create the content with you, right? And almost have a stake in the creative process. And it sounds like that's kind of what you're talking about. Like, you can be as weird as you want in that space because it's a safe space where you've got a proper social bond with some of the people that come in and share that with you. And you can kind of use it as a sandbox then, right? Which I guess would that then maybe inform the kind of work that you ultimately put out and release?
Yeah, right? No, definitely. When they, and what they'll say to me, give me feedback on, it'll obviously motivate me, inspire me. Oh, cool, they love that. I'll do some more like that. And they're the people I sort of trust, They're the people I really know actually care. They're not there just to nick ideas for their own social platforms. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
yeah, absolutely.
Can I add one thing?
Course,
because algorithm just triggered me.
Yeah.
Yesterday I opened my feed on my mobile phone, and I'm not lying. That's what happens. And I had a suggestion of the worst nuclear tests in the world. Which really, the timing, it makes sense that the algorithm would suggest that, but it was the last thing I wanted to see yesterday.
Yeah.
It really didn't help. And so, I definitely enjoy an environment without algorithms, because as helpful as they can be, they can also be terribly wrong. And that, for me, was a perfect example of what an algorithm definitely shouldn't do.
Oh, absolutely. We had Gemma Caldon on the stage earlier talking about the need to audit algorithms and make sure they're just not running out of control and, messing with everyone's heads and being very, very immoral and that kind of stuff. But this is a new creative paradigm. You've actually got a relationship that has never really existed before with technology and with your audience, and the audience gets to interact with you. You teach them how to make music. You send them the stems of your tracks. It's so exciting. Coming over to yourself, Ben, this seems to be opening up this world of, disintermediated relationships between artists and fans. It's taking away the walled gardens. It's breaking down the barriers of the gatekeepers. Do you think this is a trend that is, of the time? Do you think it's going to extend to more areas? What's your take on this? Because it seems quite recent and very profound.
Yeah.
Where do you think it's going to go?
I don't want to be like the one that is skeptical here. Earlier I was like, creators are not, entrepreneurs are not creators. I'm going to be a bit of the same here. Of course, the old gatekeepers kind of are out of the way. You can create a business that is on your passion, you can create a business.
Sure.
But at the same time, there are other new players that are kind of owning a lot of your relationships, right? Mm-hmm. We're talking about algorithms. We're talking about when you say going direct to fan, what is it that you're using as a platform? So the main reason that is very direct is that you own this relationship. You can move away if you want to leave your Discord and go elsewhere, you can do it. But you still have those platforms there, right? And that's where I'm kind of wondering if that is something where I can sort of trust you guys. I'm not looking at your Twitch specifically, but if you end up, in the hands of another company, what will be happening, right? Mm-hmm. This is kind of the idea there. It's I wouldn't be so naive as to thinking that it's okay, it's going to be fine. We're in the new era. Mm-hmm. There's other gatekeepers here, and they are very strong.
I mentioned it before. The new gatekeepers will likely emerge, right? And that kind of consolidation you get is typical, and you've seen that in traditional media in the past, where 250 pay TV channels, kind of many of them fail, and you ultimately have a lot less after 10 years. But I would say, from a Twitch perspective, the kind of business model we operate, it's win-win when it comes to creators. If creators aren't successful and can't monetize, can't take part in the creator economy and succeed, then our business model fails ultimately too, right? So we have this kind of intrinsic stake in the business and the success of the talent that we work with, right? I'm don't expect to convince you right now, but like, in theory, this is how it should sustain an ecosystem that's healthy all round, supports everyone in it.
Yeah, and I think also, so sorry if I can add one last thing. It's different. It's not like when you have your cloud storage, and they make it incredibly difficult for you to move elsewhere because it's kind of stuck there, and uploading is fine, downloading is difficult. I think when you build membership on Patreon or on other platforms, you know these people. You have all their contact details, etc. So if Rachel tomorrow decides, hey, I'm not going to use Patreon, I'm going to use something else, she has all the email addresses, she has all the contacts, and that makes a fundamental difference to how gatekeepers would traditionally operate, where you're at the mercy of them, letting you have your audience. And I think that is a fundamental difference now. And I think, as a creator, I'd be very conscious of that. I'd be very much looking at platforms of like, okay, what is the purpose? And we definitely on our platform see a trend from people wanting to move away from social media dependency because of exactly that reason. They might have built an audience of 10 million people somewhere, but they don't own it. They don't know who these people are. They can't even communicate with them. And I think that's a fundamental change. And that's why I think gatekeeper means something different in the current environment than it may have meant in previous years.
I was just going to say, to add to that, I think Ronnie's absolutely right. Like, we encourage creators on Twitch to use YouTube, right? To use Patreon, because these services are additive, right? And if you are successful on YouTube, that then rubs off on your Twitch and can drive audience back to your Twitch, right? So I think the creator economy isn't necessarily kind of distributed across a number of services, and Twitch can play its role there, very much wants to, but it shouldn't be your only bet. You don't want to put all your eggs in one basket as a creator, right? You want to spread yourself around a bit.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. And it kind of brings to mind, it's like these platforms, they kind of succeed or fail on the basis of how good they are for creatives, how good they are for the audience. It's all about providing the best possible platform, the best tools, the best understanding of what's needed by the artist and the audience. But it also means there's no kind of lock-in, and that's maybe something that investors would look at, and they'd, I don't know. Is it a bit risky, like not having that lock-in in terms of investment? Ben, I'm going to come to yourself for some real talk now. Do you think there's a significant kind of investment opportunity within the creator economy? What are the kind of opportunities and maybe threats to the economy? What would you be looking for as an investor, or if you're advising somebody to invest in the sector?
So same, as earlier, there is an interesting element where people have been making the comparison between creators and startups, kind of a lot, right? Yeah. Especially with music, that was something that at some point would be like, oh, the business model of record labels. It's kind of the same as a VC, because you have to, spray and pray type of thing. You want to see, how it goes at the end. There's only have a few winners out of the, 20 or 100 startups that you're going to be backing. Same, for music in the old days. And here, what I would say is that there is. I know we're going to be talking about this right after, but there is right now potentially a bubble or a big fad coming up with everything around the metaverse, and I know we have to talk about this right after, but that's an area where I'll be like, if you're an investor and you're hearing a creators economy startup pitching you, including Web3 in the pitch, I'll be a bit cautious about this right now, because I feel like it's like the second peak of the hype. I know we talk about this right after. Everything that is making it more localized, that would be an interesting area. So let's say the Patreon of Middle East or Southeast Asia, like targeting specific markets, I would see this as a very promising kind of area of investment. Totally. And also in terms of other sort of genre of content, as you could see with like writing, like everything around Substack is suddenly growing, will be something that I would look into.
Yeah. Amazing. Yeah, there's that old saying, if the taxi driver gives you investment advice, it's time to disinvest in whatever the your taxi driver is saying you need to buy this crypto, then it's like a little bit of a red flag. I'm not an investor. I couldn't possibly comment. So, Ronnie, coming over to yourself, I mean, you have kind of, you sit on the board of VOT, which is, the largest organization for, indie, music in Germany. It's one of the most significant global organizations. You have a real kind of inside perspective on how important this is to the overall economy of the creative industries, which is massive, and it's an economy that is sometimes underrated. I mean, do you kind of see this as, revolution or evolution? Where do you see this fitting into the future? It feels like the box has been opened, and this is how things are going to be from now on, but I'd love to get your take on where this all fits in.
Yeah. No, I mean, the most interesting element for me when I discovered Patreon and membership, and I actually honestly discovered it very late in the game, as most of the music industry, which is funny because Jack is a musician to solve the needs for musicians, and then pretty much every type of media creator was using the platform much before music.
Yeah.
I guess music always has this tendency to be late to the game. But I think the most shocking thing for me was to say there's finally something like a stable income, like a recurring income that you can kind of bank on, and there's relatively little churn, so usually most creators actually grow over time. And I mean, for the music industry, I mean, you've been a musician, like a stable income has never been the case. You would work for a year or 2 years on an album, you wouldn't get paid. When the album is coming out, there's 90 days or a year later, you'd finally get some of the payments that come back to you through multiple ways. If you were touring, you would get money. If you're not touring, you would not get money. And now you actually have a way to basically have your salary. And it's not tied to a finished product. It's actually tied to being creative. So, you could be on the platform for, I guess, 2 years. Rachel could never finish a track and just be talking about the experience of making music, buying new tools, writing songs or whatever, and there's no pressure of saying 3 months from now a company is depending on your album to come out. I remember years ago when I think Coldplay delayed their album.
Oh yeah.
And a major was at a risk of going bankrupt because they were banking on that album. Do you want to be a musician that's in that position?
Oh,
that's kind of crazy to me. And so I think that flexibility of freeing the boundaries of having to finish something in order to monetize from your creativity, and that stable recurring income, for me, are the most powerful elements of membership that have never existed before. Or maybe, when back in the days when you would have like a Mäzen that would give you money to create hundreds of years ago. Sure. But I think the traditional recorded music industry and other creative industries never had that. Whether you're a book author, whether you're a painter or something like that. And I think that is really I would call it a revolution, not an evolution, because it really is brand new. And there's a lot of, we talked about community, etc., but the recurring income and the freedom to not have to worry about a finished product, I think for me are the most revolutionary part about it.
I would agree with you wholeheartedly, and I remember back in my musician days, the idea of a predictable income stream was just, it wasn't even in the picture. It was like, my overdraft got killed during those years. My God, waiting for those PRS checks to come in on the back of tours. It was very precarious. So thank you. It's absolutely great to see, what all of you are doing in this space. It's just wonderful. I think it's a better, more exciting, fast-moving world for creators to be in, and it's tools like this who are bringing it to the world and making entirely new business models possible. And, it's very exciting. And so, maybe one more question for yourselves. We're kind of coming close to time, and I'll start it with your good self, Rachel. Talk to us a bit about what's next for yourself. You mentioned a single's coming out in 2 weeks. Talk to us a bit about any events, anything that's going to be happening on Patreon, and how people can find you as well.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, so I've got a busy month actually. I'm off to Paris next week for the first show since the summer, and then I'm playing South by Southwest in Texas.
Outstanding.
On the 14th at 1 a.m. set, so it's going to be a big party set. And so I'm really in show land at the minute. I'm doing lots of rehearsing and programming and on my Patreon I will have every month I have community events where everybody submits a track, we do a challenge and we listen through and then we post the replay. bit like, I guess, what's it called, Eurovision, Patreon style.
Amazing.
Every month, because there's people from, well, not Euro, global vision, because there's people from all over the world doing it. But yeah, and I'm just online, just Rachel K. Collier. I'm pretty much everywhere. I was going to add earlier, you know, about the platforms like cross-talking. Like I've kind of just always had the attitude, just try everyone and see which one pops off, and then you can kind of go with that. So Patreon started to work for me. YouTube, you know, I think it's worth, because you never know who you connect with on which platform more. So, but yeah. So that's how you find me.
Absolutely fantastic. So we'll see you down the front for Rachel Vision coming soon. I like it. Excellent. And Anthony, talk to us a bit about what's happening, what's coming up for Twitch and yourself.
Yeah, I think I talked a bit before about the greater diversification of content we see on Twitch. Yeah. I think that trend's going to continue into kind of new, weirder spaces as we just grow our audience, and you get an increasing number of people who come to Twitch that want to see different types of content. I think that will provide the raw material for creatives to work with to build communities around different stuff that isn't gaming. And yeah, I mentioned music and sports talk as two areas there where we're really excited about what's coming up. I think also, 2021 was a big year for us. We've recently reset our pricing model for our subscriptions product globally to better meet the kind of purchasing power of people in different parts of Europe. So one of the big ambitions we've got is to increase how well we facilitate the kind of livelihood production for creators in parts of the world where we've traditionally been less good at that. Basically, how can we help people make more money, monetize better from Twitch? I think that's an area we're looking into a lot at the moment in 2022. That'll be a theme for us, I think. So two key areas: diversification of content, improving that monetization potential for creators.
Outstanding. Watch this space over at twitch.tv. Awesome. And Ben, coming over to yourself, how can folks get involved in Startup Sesame? Are you doing any events around 4 years from now, or how can people find you?
Well, I'm so happy that we're finally coming together again, right?
Yes.
You know? Last time in Barcelona was in February 2020, when the 4 years from now was unfortunately cancelled. So quite a packed schedule for the spring with events coming back. And right now we are doing some tests with our own professional platform. It's like LinkedIn for people who go to a lot of events. If you want to try it, you go to sesamers.com, or you could just talk to me. I'm going to be out there until Thursday. Amazing. And yes, there is a lot of parties. Same, we know which parties are happening during 4 years from now. If you have questions, I'm going to be outside. Just talk to me.
Absolutely. Ben and the folks at Sesamers are your guides to the best parties at 4 years from now. That I can guarantee you. It is worth connecting for that alone, on top of all the other stuff that they do over there. So thank you, Ben. And coming over to yourself, Ronnie, talk to us a bit about what's coming up for Patreon. It's exciting times. It's been going through the roof. We've heard some great stuff that you're doing now. What's next?
Yeah, I must say I'm a little bit nervous because there's a time running down here, which reminds me of my CrossFit class in the morning.
Fair play.
Well, what's next? Okay, we are still trying to make Patreon the most accommodating international platform that we can be. Yeah. And in 2020 we started with 4 languages. In 2021 we launched over 20 additional languages, and we're going to continue on that path so that the user experience on the creator and on the fan side and most regions of the world is going to be like a local experience. So that is a big investment for the company. We're growing the team in Europe because we have this Central European office in Berlin, and we're building out teams for all the different languages and territories, and we're still growing that team. And additionally, we're investing heavily. The majority of our last 2 fundraising rounds goes into new technology and features, etc. And obviously, I can't really talk about those details yet. But watch the space. There's a lot of interesting things coming on Patreon.
Outstanding. Okay, folks, get yourselves over to patreon.com, make an account, support some of the amazing creators who are on there. Ladies and gents, please join me in thanking our incredible panel, Ronnie, Ben, Anthony, and Rachel. Thank you so much.